Hi, everyone, and welcome back to one more session of Workplace Stories. And I picked up a easy theme this time. I didn't have really racked my brains for this. Yeah, the blame game, and very easily relatable to me at least. And again, a friendly reminder to all of you that all of us specialize in this equally. And I think of it as something that we do bade aaram se, right? And I don't even feel, that we are doing it so often. That's the kind of feeling I get all the time. Like I woke up today at 7, and my wife asked, why late? Uh, I said, look, yesterday I had this late night call with my friend. So that, and I think she's been asking this for the last 3 days because I generally am an early riser. And uh, day first day it was that, that IPL match was very interesting. So I just wish I could smile and own it up and say, hey, I got lazy or I need a little more sleep. But I don't know why. वो नहीं हो पाता है, to say that it's me. And I think the first time I realized that it's someone else's fault was when, at a very young age, I saw my cousin getting her, 10th standard results. As you know, it's a big time. The first major exams those days was 10th, and I guess it still is even today, right? And she was a bright student, so all of us had very high aspirations. So it was like asking, how much did she get? So there was a lot of people queuing up to know, and she had got what could be considered as a below par marks. And you can imagine how the conversations go at home, right? Because we all have high expectations from our kids, and suddenly they get closer. The discussion that day at home was the evaluators were wrong. ऐसे कैसे हो सकता है इसको इतना कम कैसे मिलेगा, right? And there was squarely all of us blaming the system. And a day passed, and of course eventually, as it used to happen and still happens, went for revaluation. And revaluation में उतने ही marks है, right? And even then, I guess I don't think we change our opinion on, you know, how the evaluators were, how they gotten it wrong, and things like that. So I'm sure from that day, I it got validated in me that you can blame anybody, you know, and possibly get away. And if I recollect, we always say from the school industry, the teachers teach me, you know, friends are influencing my son or daughter. You need to change the circle. Then I think he'll get better. The school is too lax, and I wish they were a little more stricter. My kid would be brighter, intelligent. Or let's say you go to an exam, uh, maths paper. Maths paper was really tough. What does it mean? It actually means that either what I had prepared for didn't come, or I hadn't adequately prepared at all. One of the things, right? So the same guys who went to school, college, all of us now have all landed up in workplaces, haven't we? And what we haven't graduated from is the finger pointing mindset. Now, today I put out a poll on LinkedIn for all of you who took part in that about why we do not take ownership. Why do we blame others? Of course, we could have given multiple options. LinkedIn allows only four. And in that poll, the topmost people said is it is very difficult to own a failure. It's going to hurt. That's what people say. It's going to hurt. And that was number one. And of course, people talked about organization culture, people talked about leaders not taking the bullets as the other two primary factors. But most of them said it is not easy to take the blame, because it's going to hurt you in the company. So let's dwell a little deeper around this, can we? I want to possibly start uh, on the leadership front. I once joined an organization which possibly had one of the largest leadership churns that I had seen at that point of time. And during my induction, I met multiple people. And during the inductions, many of the senior leaders giving different explanations for this churn. They said, look, uh, uh, A, she was too ambitious. She did not gauge the market right. She got it all wrong. And say, this person R, he was too self-centered. He did not take people along with him. So, it didn't work out. Mr. Yam, uh, he brought the FMCG mindset here. As you know, it doesn't work here. So for everyone, there was a reason as to why it was that person's fault that they eventually had to leave the company. And I eventually met the vice president to whom all these people had reported. He said, Kamal, I have to tell you this, it was my fault. I recruited the wrong guys. Uh, in whatever way he meant that, but at least in a public forum where there were many people, I thought he owned it up. So, but he also ended up saying, "Kamal, look, please make this decision of my hiring work by getting things right for me." Uh, I was like, "Wow, not bad." Somebody in public saying it was my fault, but you and I know these occasions are rare, and especially people admitting in public is really rare by a leader. But that was the one-off that I've heard in many years. Uh, but when I talk about others, I also need to talk about myself, because this very thing of not my fault came to my head because of me. And I remember once uh, I was representing our annual numbers in one of the meetings, and numbers were not great. And as I was hiding behind a PowerPoint, and we talk about highlights, lowlights, give all the analysis, and confuse people because of our lack of performance, or we don't have the numbers to show. And my bosses, super bosses, my PS were in that setting. They weren't pleased with the analysis, and started to ask me some tough questions. And when they ask these questions, obviously, as my, you're standing in a public forum, your heart is pumping, and uh, when you are under the pump, many times I think you don't know what you're saying, and your survival instincts take over, and you say whatever comes to your head. And I think amongst the many things I said, two things which possibly stood out is one, I said I wish we had better technology, and we would have been more efficient, won more deals because our competitors have better technologies than us. And also, we're plagued by attrition. These are two things I think amongst the many other things I must have said that day. And you know, review meetings, as you know, bosses are there to tell you what they think of, and you'll never have your say, especially if your numbers are down and you're giving all kinds of excuses and blaming somebody else. So the boss asked, "Can you quantify to me how many of these deals that you lost were purely because of technology?" Honestly, in my head, I could think of one or two, but sometimes these outliers is what stays in our head. No, the exceptions stay in our head. So uh, I said I'll make a list and send it to you because there's so many of them kind of stuff. But honestly, think top of my head, I could only think of two. And he also sarcastically asked, or the tone sounded to me like that. He's saying, "Who do you think is responsible for attrition?" I was really cornered that day, but I guess beyond that, they didn't push me, thank God. So it got over. But sometimes when we make these excuses in public forums, we can be called out. And it was one of those moments where I stood there in front of my peer group, and I felt really bad that I made so much excuses, and I also couldn't get away. Sometimes you get away by making excuses. I didn't even get away that day. So that was the worst part, right? Now, let's say, when we're talking about attrition, I wanted to bring this up now. In the current context, let's say in the technology market is booming, and let's say you're losing a lot of people and you're not getting enough people to join you. We're all talking about 50%, 60% joining ratios at best case. Will you sit here uh, uh, and start moaning, saying, market is tough? Or will you say, what an opportunity? Last year, this time, we were worried about pay cuts, layoffs, and we're possibly praying that things should get better. And now we have a once in a lifetime opportunity to scale. Should we be thankful, or should we blame that there's going to be attrition and people are skipping jobs and they're asking 200% hikes? So that's just a kind of a context change. And when I talked about technology as one of the experience of mine, it is a continuation of that. So obviously, when I blame technology, somebody said, "Okay, we'll give you technology. Go do it. You want technology, we give it to you." So my boss had to give the technology approval, so he gave. And we said for developing an application for ourselves, we said, India, man, there are many providers. We can just outsource it. So we have great tech companies. So let's outsource. And we gave it to somebody. And they came up with something which didn't work. Uh, it was, at least to my best of knowledge, it wasn't something that we could use. Then they said, "Okay, we will insource it." So then we insourced. And after a few months, we are having the same problem. The output was not great. We are not getting good people to join. As I was saying, no technology. You need to be a tech company to hire great people, so you won't get the best talent. So, we can't do it in-house, because we are not a technology company. Then we back to square one. And at that point of time, one leader stood tall and she said, "Look, I'll take responsibility. Give me a project manager." And she found a service provider outside. And over the next 1 year, she developed a tech application in Media, which worked fantastically well at that point of time. And when I look back, I think it was not about whether it was insourced or outsourced. Somebody just took responsibility and it happened. Plain and simple. Now, of course, this taking responsibility is a tricky thing. In today's poll that we talked about, close to 40% people said taking responsibility for failures can hurt. Right? I tend to agree in some of the context that I've seen because uh, as much as we love that to happen, but we also know that if we have people who are saying every time something goes wrong, somebody stands up and says it was my fault, I take responsibility. What do you think? It's a weak guy, right? One of the startups I worked in the past, which was sales driven, we had one of the sales guys who was, you can call it sincere types, and he used to always come and say, when we ever lost a deal, say, I couldn't convince the customer well enough. I think that's my analysis. And then the boss, the sales training team, will hammer him, do role plays. Till they felt he got it right in his head. He became confident. The issue is confidence, kind of stuff. All those things were happening. And he was always into duress because he was the first guy who would say, I don't think I had the right conversation with the customer. So everybody thought it was his problem. And it became a kind of it went viral rather. You can say that everybody else knew that, okay, this guy is like this, and because he's like this and he owns up, we are not using those terms, but you know such बोलने का कोई फायदा नहीं. That's how the sales guys in the team actually start to say it. So they would come, because we were a startup, they would come and tell in the sales meetings, oh, we're a small company, we have no brand equity, competitors spend so much money on events, lunches, cocktail parties, and the company's leadership team used to go on a spin with their own self-doubts. Yeah, we're a small company and all that stuff. Because the guys had learned that if you come and say, look, I couldn't sell, I couldn't have a decent conversation with the customer, I didn't have enough conversations with customers or prospects, they would be eaten alive, right? So I think people learned it so well that the honest guy incidentally, the honest guy that I talked about who always said that, or rather mostly said that, I couldn't convince the customer, or, I could have done better. He was the number one sales guy. He had the maximum numbers, but it so happens that he also was an honest guy who used to say, I take the responsibility. So, of course, outlier kind of an example you can say, but in my view, we all have this perception and experience, which has possibly driven this perception that the more you take responsibility, the weak you look, and you're possibly likely to be attacked, and you're going to suffer. There's not great optics, right, to come into a meeting where the project has not gone well, where you say you're not done well enough. Rather to say these are the problems, and make it look very complex. People say, yeah, it's a tough one to do, right? So that is one aspect that I found, that if you want to take blame, it's not easy. Of course, one of the aspects that we talked about in that poll, I asked the question, is also about the culture, the organization culture, right? I know the organization culture word is a little abused, but let me do it also. So imagine, there is an organization where there is no psychological safety. If you would be cornered, would you take accountability, right? So one thing I remember about the other side of not owning up, if you want to call it. So being in a sales role throughout my life, I used to do field trips, and I was working with one of my sales guys, and his numbers were down. And at the end of the day, I asked him, "Yaar, kya ho raha hai?" I'm like, this is a great market. This market, we've had great sales in the past. Why is it not happening now? So he said, look, I'm always cornered in this company by my manager. There is no trust. I'm constantly under the gun. How can I perform if every time I'm doubted, not trusted enough, not motivated? If I'm under the pump all the time, it's very difficult to perform, sir. And I somehow bought into it. I thought the guy was sincere. He's reaching out to me and telling me that that this what's happening, because I didn't know how my manager and he were conversing. So then that day, end of the day, I called my manager and said, "Kya ho raha hai? Why is he under the pump?" Of course, sales numbers are down. Then my manager said, "Kamal, you put me under so much pressure for not achieving the numbers. And this is sales. There will be pressure, right? If you think I'm that bad, maybe next 6 months, ask the guy to report to whomsoever he wants to report." It was a kind of I thought the manager was being cocky, and possibly running away. But then my HR guy said, maybe let's try this. So we put this guy, or rather asked him to report to somebody else who was one of the most popular managers. Everybody loved to work with that guy, so we put him under that another person. Guess what? This guy left in 3 months. Okay, so my take is, you can actually give all the excuses and blame somebody else, but time actually runs out eventually. Many of us, when we quit, whom do we blame? We blame the managers half of the time. And some of us keep quitting every year or every alternate year, don't we? I'm just wondering, if it all piles up when you're 30, 35 years of age and you look at your CV and, uh, how many enterprises and managers can you really blame? This company ka culture acha nahi tha, oh, I left because of my manager. You know, you would be blaming your manager and enterprise so frequently that you would run out of excuses. And imagine 8 to 10 managers and enterprise you have to blame by that time for taking that call that I blame my manager and that's the reason I left. So I can go on, but I what I wanted to leave you with today in terms of this aspect of we not owning up, which is very, very tough. I have not owned up most of my life. Most of the companies that I've worked for, I've always found a gully fall guy or a fall context. Not that I pushed out so many people, but I always found somebody whom I could blame. And I think given a choice, I'll keep doing it if I don't feel psychologically safe. I have no silver bullet to offer today on this habit of ours. Given a chance, I would blame others for something that has gone wrong, honestly. I think it requires great courage to take responsibility. And if we get that lucky and to work with leaders, I think clearly one of the questions I asked today is, would leadership help? And almost 25% of people said that leaders with courage would help. I think we'll be extremely lucky to work with leaders who are courageous, who own up, and who lead from the front and say, this is because of me. The first example I talked about, the vice president who said, I made poor decision. Though I thought, in a way, he was sort of pushing the blame on the people because I did hire the wrong guys. It was them eventually and not him, but he took the call, right? So I still think, in a very intelligent way, he took the blame, but he really was blaming somebody else in that case. But I think it's quite possible for all of us who are leading organizations to, take responsibility and also create organizational spaces where psychologically safe for people to take that responsibility. And I would like to believe that that will create more people who are responsible. Every time something goes wrong and I'm attacked, it is quite possible that my natural instincts will come into play and I'll start blaming the circumstances, the people, or whatever that possibly works in that company, right? So this is really a tough one to take responsibility and hold ourselves accountable. It's very difficult, like we went through right now, from childhood to school to what all spaces we have gone through in academics to now. We always either through the system we came from or it allowed us to naturally blame others. So it is going to be really tough for us to stand up and take accountability wherever we are. But I think I would recommend one book by written by three people: Roger Connors, Tom Smith, and Craig Hickman. A book called Oz Principles. Oz Principles is a wonderful book about how organizations can bring accountability without failing people. I mean, like what we are all used to is the people saying, let's wait and see. Uh, it's a confusion. Tell me what to do. It's not my job. Let's ignore or deny. We finger point, right? So these kind of things the authors call in Oz Principles as below the line. They say they offer these two concepts called below the line, which is what I just described, and they say above the line. In above the line, they talk about the steps to accountability. That means they say you do it, you solve it, you own it, and you see it. So and wonderful examples given, and I think it can be a great workshop if you guys can do it in your own organization about how to own up things which possibly didn't go your way. At the same time, how you can make people accountable for it, and without having to create an atmosphere of fear. It's a wonderful book. It's called The Principles of Oz, OZ, OZ. This is the best book on accountability and bestseller. I recommend all of you really read it. So that's it from me today. The quick completion to not my fault. And actually, I possibly would have left out at least some 10, 15 other stories I've noted down because they all looked similar to me. When I finally, in the final analysis, I looked into it, they all look the same to me. So if you have any comments, any personal experiences about why we don't own and why we do not find leaders who don't own, or why the organization cultures come in the way, happy to take it through the chats that you guys have been already been writing through. Quite a lot. Yogesh says our leaders don't want us to grow, they're afraid of our talent. Wow. That's a statement. Kalyani says blaming others for our mistakes is the easiest way of avoiding the truth about ourselves, but isn't it a temporary thing? In the long run, we have to pay some or the other day. Instead, accepting the mistakes will give us a chance to learn not to repeat the mistakes ever again. Fair enough, Kalyani. Only invitation to you is how many times will you accept your mistakes, or how consistently can you keep saying, I take responsibility, I take accountability, and still the organization will accept what you said, or your leader accepts what you say and allows you to move on, right? So that is the kashmakash of you and the leader, because you look weak, you look like a somebody who repeatedly, sort of doesn't do things, and the easiest thing he will say is, if you ask him, he'll say, yeah, my fault. What will you do, right? So will you appear weak? What is the optics about it? Just think about it. Sandra and Marshall, Scotland. I believe that we all have to earn our achievements, and I'm not being arrogant. Someone said it once, a moment's pain is worth a lifetime of, and I'm going to change the last word to achievement. I'm an older person who has got lots of things wrong in my life, but I believe in new ideas. Thank you, Sandra, for your thoughts. Kajal, most of the workplaces we can see this blame game. That's right, Kajal. क्या करें? Very few to accept it and work under the same. I think it's to do with the leaders we work, and I'm repeating when I say what I'm saying, but it is difficult to create that. Even as you know, a part of leading a team, I somewhere felt the more room I guess, ठीक है यार, अगले बार करेंगे. How many times would you actually keep giving that space? One fine day you said, yeah, karo ya maro types. So we've heard organizations even saying that. So, we always like to people to come on the front foot and say, boldly that they tried everything, but still nahi ho paya. Right? It's difficult to create that kind of atmosphere, and kudos to companies and leaders who actually create that. Chandrima Banerjee says playing the blame game never works. People who blame others for their mistakes lose status, learn less, and perform worse related to those who own up to their mistakes. Can't agree more, Chandrima, but how consistently we can do it, and how our organization allows us to do that, that we will be lucky to work in such organizations. Abhishek Chakraborty says another manipulative technique is saying I cannot spoon feed you, so either the boss do not know the answers and the fear of losing their dominance. Yeah, that's true. That's true. But not all bosses are the same. Are they? Some of them, I guess, do spoon feed, do coach, do direct, and some of them saying, "Ask me the kal ho jayega, don't worry." Right. So they're good ones too. Chandrima again says to prevent a culture of blame, it's important to set clear expectations and boundaries for your team. When people know exactly what their responsibilities are, it's harder to blame others when things go awry, and it's less likely to go wrong in the yeah. Lost it there. Maybe there's a continuation. So yeah, I guess we can say it's a culture, but see, organization may have a certain culture, but teams have their own culture. I think teams can correct themselves, and every organization is a bunch of many teams, small teams. So I think in there the leader will matter if they are willing to accept what has gone wrong and saying hota hai. If we can get to that mindset, it will be great. Oh, sorry, Yogesh. I'm feeling very diabetic when you say this. Okay, that we need a boss like you. You ask people who work with me, I'm not that sweet. Okay, so I'm as nasty as anybody could get when it comes to not agreeing to people failing. I have my moments, so not true. Do your homework properly. Fair enough. I think I've possibly covered everything that has been said. Cool. Thank you very much for logging in, everyone. And I'm hoping that we all find our space, in the organizations that we work for to, know, accept our responsibilities, take blames if it's possible, and hopefully we won't be hurt by the system, by the managers, because we put up our hand and said, "This time I take accountability, but I'll get it right." Right. So stay safe, be courageous, and if you can, at least make a signature of yours that you take responsibility. And as much as possible, create psychologically safe atmospheres for your teams if you're in a leadership role. Thank you for joining in. Bye bye.